Welcome back. It's Lionel, Tech Lead and partner at Westfall. Today, I want to talk to you about budget car rentals, massive $32 million mess up with Accenture for rebuilding their brand new website and how project management can go down the drain. I want to share with you my insights as a tech lead, watching the project, going through all the information that I've seen online and through this site that I found. I'll put the link below. Very good breakdown of what happens in a project management and the different kind of risks that you could face when you build such a project, right? And I've got this right over here. Let me just take a look at. Now, just a little disclaimer here. I don't really have any inside information on what exactly happened. I wasn't working on that project. What I can do is look at the science, my experience, and share that with you when you're building your project, especially something that large or that complicated. So let's take a look at what went wrong, right? The first thing about it is that Hertz describes a 5-layer architecture for their digital platform, right? And they suggested that Accenture recommended this architecture. Now, the first one, okay, the presentation layer in which the screens and the interface were presented to the users using the JavaScript framework Angular. Oh my goodness, Angular. This is just the recipe for design management. Adobe Experience Manager was the tool of choice to update and revise the content that appears on the website. And then they had a microservice layer, an integration layer, MuleSoft, and a backend system. Okay, so that was the microservice layer, handled things like services and Hertz representatives and emails and all that kind of stuff. Now, I want to give you some context. In this case, Hertz is the victim claiming that Accenture was evil and all that kind of stuff. That is a little yellow flag to me, right, would be the change of the CTO and then the digital change. So they were already struggling with this kind of project. The other thing about this is that it's a $32 million project, right? So you expect a lot of corporate bureaucracy, your cloud of factors in the code during the project, right? So can you imagine, right? According to this document here on the breakdown of it, Hertz has all these requirements and somehow Accenture screwed it up. And the first point that the point where Angular was going from Angular 1 into Angular 2. And nobody knew that Angular 2 was a complete rewrite of Angular 1. It's very difficult, my experience, to work with Angular 2. It's such a robust, not robust, such a monolithic big platform. So that was probably one of the reasons, right, that we learned that they're having trouble, especially going from non-responsive to responsive. And that's the first point down here, right up on top here, no responsive design. Now, I have come across these issues before myself, okay? We have built some applications for clients where there's been no word about whether something should be responsive or not. And after doing desktop, suddenly the client says, hey, I thought it would be responsive. And everyone was like, what happened? This is pretty common in the business of not building something responsive because it's maybe not required or not needed. So the first point about this is that you have to be explicit about being responsive. It's not something that comes attached to the design or something that is just an afterthought. It's something that you really plan for. There's a lot of things you can't do when you go for a responsive design, and there's a lot more work that you have to take into consideration. Different application size, different system sizes. Everybody's got a bigger, smaller, device to use it. So that is one area. This compounded with the problem of Angular, right? That would make it really excruciating pain to make something responsive. So that's one of the points over here. Second point, as I'm reading down here, is that they said, okay, this had been the standard practice for years, and it's even included in the contract that was signed. So somehow the team decided that only desktop and mobile versions were needed according to Hertz. Now look, If you're building responsive and you're building mobile, that's one method of delivering two applications. Then there's the responsive method. Generally, you don't have everything. Okay, it's very hard to manage that. Very likely issue to have been missed. Everyone might have signed off and said okay, and then now they complain about it. The other thing here I see is no common core. So that was highlighted here, that core of libraries to be fundamental principle of design. This is the point that I was talking about microprocessors and spread across many systems. And you can see here we've got Accenture using the Angular as a front end, Adobe Experience Manager, microservice layer, integration layer using MuleSoft, and then a backend system. So many things, right? And they're complaining that there's no core, there's no one universal truth. Again, it could have been on Hertz side not to highlight this. It could have been on Accenture side to not want to have something flowing, or it could have evolved in that way. It is a mistake that a lot of project managers make, or architecture design. I don't see Hertz or Accenture being responsible for this stuff. It could be anything. It depends. It would take a long time for your consultants to actually figure out what Hertz would be wanting to do that. The last point here is vulnerable code, right? Hertz states the code was written by Accenture, was terrible, and a security nightmare waiting to happen. Now, security is one of those things that is very difficult to define, right? You could be living in a house, and if, say, the US Army broke in there, you couldn't do anything. You know, you would need missile turrets and ICBM or something like that to protect yourself. Security is one of those things, right, that clients don't usually pay for. It's difficult to match it because there are new threats every single day. It's easy to undercook it and to overcook it. So in this case, right, because Angular was used as the front end, a lot of code would have been exposed. This would have been a security issue. And I'm sure Accenture knew about it. They tried to patch it, but it was too late. The other thing that you're looking at is so many microservices. Every point there is a connection is a security vulnerability. Or the other kind of systems, so like Adobe Experience Manager, I have honestly never heard of anyone using that. That could have been a security stuff. It's not exactly Accenture's fault, okay? It could have been budget's fault for not saying how complicated or simple or putting them together. So this is, again, another issue of how miscommunication could cause a project to fail. The total value of this project was $32 million, okay? Roughly about 12 million more than I would have charged to do such a thing. But, you know, probably $4 million just to manage the budget people. The last one here is testing. Hertz accuses Accenture of not robustly testing the system and finding a lot of flaws in there. Now, this is another common area, right, where clients testing, again, very easy to undercook, very easy to overcook. There's no end to the amount of testing that you can do, right? No end. It's a matter of cost and matter of controlling something. Now, one problem that was not defined in Hertz, right, was how extensive the test should be and what they should be covering. Now, I want to make a point about this, right, that a lot of clients, they go back and they think that a software should be tail-end tested. That means, let me give you an example, okay? You bought a car and a nuclear bomb dropped on the car. And you said, hey, my car has been destroyed by a nuclear bomb. It was not tested for a nuclear bomb. You should have tested it for nuclear bomb, act of God, act of Zeus, Marvel Avengers, 1, 2, and 3, destroying the whole universe. My car should have been intact. Now that is obviously impossible. What you can do is take a certain amount of range and test that so that your cost doesn't blow out of control. I know both extremes, those that are not testing anything, just rolling out the software, and those people that spend millions of dollars just testing, right? They invent stuff, they think of scenarios and they test that, and they waste so much money to roll out software. You basically get a movie that, where the sequel takes 30, 40 years and never gets all the, banned, like something like Red Sonja 2. This is very common. So I encourage all of you guys, if you're looking at a really good project to look at, this is one of the best examples of how you waste $32 million. I would say, summing this whole thing up, right? Number one, budget did not spend enough time building some internal capability of what they wanted to do. Okay? Just because you get a top-notch consulting firm, I wouldn't say Accenture is a top-notch, but just because that does not excuse you from making decisions about your product and about what you need done. So you have to be very involved in what you need. You have to be working with the consultants, and you also have to know what is not said to be asked. So what do I mean by that? If someone's responsive, not responsive, you have to be explicit about that stuff. Number two, big mistake, using too many layers of technology. Now I look at this and I see a basket of all sorts of stuff, right? We see Adobe layer, Angular, and again, this is like the buffet spread from the client side. They would have gone into the meeting and said to Accenture, I want this and this and this and this. I heard this is good. I want my buddy Adobe, MuleSoft is in there. So many of these things, right? And Accenture would have catered it because the budget was that big. They would have gone through with this. Again, the simplest way would be to step back and say, okay, this is my first functionality here. I want 75% of this in-house. I don't want to keep using other people's layer, try to build them custom. I want something maybe one generation more stable. So Angular again was coming out. Angular 2 was coming back at the time. If they got them with Angular 1, it wouldn't have been so bad. So this whole idea where they push Angular 2, it's probably the result of budget. But again, the problem with Accenture is they just rolled with it. Finally, some of the other systems that I see, some of the requirements where the project stalled, this is as usual due to corporate bureaucracy managing the project. Very important, your consultants and within your team to actually say, okay, I want version 1 and I want version 2, rather than jump everything in there, right? So they were talking about core, they were talking about bringing so many systems together. I wouldn't have done that. I would have gone stage by stage and say, okay, we have built allowances for this amount, but we're going to go with this first. We'll do North America first. Sometimes it's not a good idea to put everything into one system and bundle them up. So this is an example of that. Couple of mistakes here. Very interesting case study. As a tech lead, I'm more interested about business case study failures than actually the kind of software that we're talking about, what kind of programming language. This is actually more real. And for a lot of programmers out there, $32 million plus 10, it's a lot of money. Unfortunately, today, budget is busted. It's a failure on their side to have the technical team, and even lawsuits are not going to help you if you cannot manage software projects. So that's the bottom line. I'm the tech lead, and that's what the tech lead said.